Chapter 5. Communication. University unites people committed to scholarly or scientific learning and the intellectual life. The original sense of universitas, a community of teachers and students, is just as important as the unity of all studies. The idea of the university requires the open mind, the readiness to relate oneself to things with the aim of getting at a picture of the whole in terms of one's special discipline. The ideal requires that there be communication, not only on an interdisciplinary, but also on an interpersonal level. The university, therefore, should enable scholars to enter into direct discussion and exchange with fellow scholars and students. According to the ideal, this communication must be of the Socratic type, posing questions so that men may achieve clarity about themselves and about each other. An atmosphere of communication based on community of thinking creates the proper conditions for scholarly and scientific work, although such work is ultimately always solitary. Intellectually fruitful communication may take the form of friendship between two people, of youth organizations, of love and marriage. There is no need to dwell on the intellectual importance of friendships such as the Brothers Grimm or Schiller and Goethe, of young groups such as the original German student fraternity, or of marriages such as that of the Schellings, the J. Stuart Mills, and the Brownings. The university is the place where truth is sought unconditionally in all its forms. All forms of research must serve truth. The radical character of this commitment creates strong intellectual tensions at the university. They are the very condition of progress. The tensions which flare up into intellectual battles are meaningful by virtue of the common ground which emerges in the course of intellectual dispute. True scholars, even in the heat of controversy, remain firmly united with one another. They can successfully communicate with one another because their search for truth at the university does not carry with it practical responsibilities. All the university recognizes is responsibility to truth. The struggle for truth must not be confused with a struggle for economic existence. It occurs on the level of disinterested investigation. Indirect responsibility for the consequences of one's ideas, for their practical application, is great whether they be true or false or both. What consequences ideas have cannot be predicted beforehand. The knowledge that such unforeseeable consequences exist, however, makes the responsible thinker cautious. As Hegel said, theoretical work accomplishes more than practical work. Once the realm of concepts is revolutionized, reality cannot hold out against it. Nietzsche saw this responsibility and shuddered. It is he who threw into the world every idea in its most radical and destructive form. He was intoxicated, yet horrified by the magic of extremes. He shouted without communicating into the hollowness of his own time. Two things increase the quality of communication. One is the absence of economic considerations and the encouragement this gives to unrestricted experimentation. Another is a responsibility of thought itself, which flourishes much better in an atmosphere of communication than as solitary thought which meets no resistance. The effectiveness of intellectual formulations and ideas is grounded in truth. Communication is itself a function of the search for truth. It tests truth for testing its effects. Intellectual exchange makes the university the place where people meet who have committed their lives to the search for truth. For the university must not be confused with the sort of school where intellectual spontaneity is rigidly channeled along curricular and pedagogical lines. For this reason, the manner in which communication takes place at the university is the intellectual responsibility of all its members. The intellectual life at a university declines when its members shut themselves cautiously off from one another, when communication changes into mere sociability, when substantial relationships become obscured by convention. Conscious reflection upon the nature of communication can make such communication possible. Debate and discussion. In the sphere of scholarship, communication is maintained through discussion. We tell each other what we have found out, but the genuine process of communication begins where our statements are questioned. This takes the form of controversy on highly specialized points. Such controversy becomes philosophical only as it approaches the ultimate issues. Controversy may take either of two forms, debate or discussion. In logical debate, certain set principles are assumed. From these, we formally deduce certain conclusions. The opponent is defeated by appeal to the law of contradiction and with the help of countless tricks which the art of logical argumentation has developed since antiquity. One person wins. The mood of the debate is characterized throughout by the desire to vanquish one's opponent. This kind of power contest, whose consequences can be very useful for formal clarity, even if they do not at all serve the cause of intellectual wholeness, invariably leads to a final break-off of communication in accordance with the principles of contra principii negatum non est disputantum, which I'm not pronouncing right, but basically is translated as, you must not argue against someone who denies the very principles of argument. In a discussion which is meant to serve genuine communication, there are no set principles and standpoints firmly maintained until victory. The premises assumed by both parties have yet to be discovered. Both parties seek to clarify their real meaning. Every principle discovered serves as a point of departure for new discussion, provided that nothing of what has gone before remains unclear. Each points out the assumptions implicitly made by his partner so that a common ground gradually emerges in the discussion. There is no end. Nobody wins. Those who seem to be in the right grow suspicious of their own rightness. Any conclusions reached serve only as stepping stones. Real, unrestricted discussion is only possible between two people alone. Even a third person is a disturbing factor, easily changing the discussion into a debate, awakening the power instinct. We can, however, discuss the advantage in larger circles. Here we can lay the groundwork for a subsequent and more thorough discussion between two people. Here we can also point out perspectives and positions. Different opinions rapidly succeed one another without any attempt at the kind of stringent discussion which thrives only in rapid private exchange. No discussions are sought, thus there are specific rules for discussion among a number of people. One must not repeat oneself, nor insist on the correctness of one's views by repetition. One must not seek to have the last word, but be content to have one say and then listen to the others. The formation of schools of thought as an instance of intellectual cooperation. Every scholarly or scientific accomplishment is ultimately an individual accomplishment. It is personal achievement. It can, however, be increased through the cooperation of many. Cooperation grows out of communication. When both of these factors are present, motivation, clarity, incentive reach their highest points. One person's ideas awaken those of another. The ball is tossed back and forth. Cooperative research is to be distinguished from collective work, which can be described as intellectual industrialization. Something is produced only because the head of the project so directs workers whom he calls associates, but who really are only links in the chain of his plan. Another type of collective work involves a number of individuals, for example, working on the same clinic, each assuming responsibility for a particular problem within a given project. Results represent individual achievements, but the whole which they combine to make up remains a collective aggregate dependent upon conversation and mutual criticism, both oral and written. The continuity of intellectual tradition is represented by schools of thought. There are two ways in which schools of thought arise. One way is to imitate a master whose work we carry on by extension, adaptation, and analogous achievement. The other way involves an unbroken intellectual tradition, within which the student may be quite as independent as his teacher, since the tradition usually does not center around a single personality, but a group. Here we have a school, an intellectual movement, which may last through several generations. Students and teachers who here meet one another on the same level benefit by mutual exchange. Competition challenges them to maximum effort. Interest rises in proportion to the response which one's ideas evoke. Competitiveness and envy are transformed into an objective and competitive enthusiasm. Schools of thought grow spontaneously. They cannot be induced or deliberately thought up. If one tries to do so, an artificial, sterile activity results. The influx in mass of mediocrity into the learned professions has given rise everywhere to a hothouse culture where either of two things is the rule. Either an external mechanical method seems easily learned and applied to the point where everyone can participate, or else a purely formal method of thought together with a limited number of simple axioms can serve as a catch-all for just about everything. New ideas usually originate in very small circles. A few people, 2, 3, or 4, perhaps in an institute or clinic, are inspired by the exchange of a common group of ideas which foster new common insights and achievements. Such a spirit grows secretly among friends, proves its value through objective accomplishment, and finally becomes a full-fledged intellectual movement. The university as a whole can never be united by such a spirit. That spirit belongs to smaller groups. The university is most alive when such groups communicate with one another. The university as the meeting place of different disciplines and world outlooks. At the university, all disciplines unite. Their students meet. They are united and inspired by the presence of so many forms of knowledge. Their mutual simulation leads toward the unity of studies. Left to themselves, the sciences tend to fall apart into a loose aggregate of unrelated units. Their joint presence at the university reawakens a sense of their connection and inspires efforts on behalf of their overall unity. However, the explicit communication between the sciences rests on a broad foundation of implicit communication. There is a basic attraction of intellectual movements, which, even as they clash, each acknowledges along with their separate identities. The will to communicate turns upon everything strange and distant, also upon people who would like to shut themselves up in a world of private beliefs. Those who want to communicate of their own accord run the risk of being put to question, because only when they are questioned to the utmost does it become clear whether they are heading in the right direction. This urge to communicate has fundamental consequences for the place of intellectual movements at the university. To be permeated by the idea of the university is part of a way of life. It is the will to search and seek without limitation, to allow reason to develop unrestrictedly, to have an open mind, to leave nothing unquestioned, to maintain truth unconditionally, yet recognizing the danger of sapere aude, dare to know. Some people might conclude from this that only that world outlook which we have just discussed should be allowed at the university, with the consequence that dissenters should be subject to an investigation of their beliefs. This, however, would violate the idea of the university. The university does not investigate the Weltanschauung of a potential member. Rather, it investigates its professional attainment and intellectual standing. The university keeps itself distinct from sects, churches, and fanatical groups, which seek to impose their own outlook upon others. The university does this because it wants to thrive in freedom only and would perish rather than carefully shelter itself from unfamiliar ideas and withdraw from intellectual conflict where fundamentals are involved. All the university must require of its members is this: professional and intellectual standing, mastery of their tools, and integrity. It would even admit people who have made what is called the sacrificio del intelletto, the sacrifice of the intellect, even those who would be intolerant if they could. The university feels confident that it can afford to do so. It wants to live dynamically, not statically. In its will to communicate, it seeks to associate even with those who resist communication. It would be contrary to the idea of the university to deny admission to a man of intellectual rank who shows proof of intellectual achievement and works in a scholarly way, even if his scholarship ultimately serves an alien interest. The demand that every world outlook be represented at the university, for example, in philosophy, history, sociology, and political science, is just as unsuited to the idea of the university. If a given world outlook fails to produce scholars of the first rank, then this outlook has no claim to scientific status. The individual certainly prefers living together with those who share his ideas. As long as he acknowledges the idea of the university and has a voice in the selection of potential faculty members, however, he will be inclined to draw the most diverse viewpoints into the university. He does this in order to create opportunities for fruitful conflict, to broaden the intellectual range at whatever risk. Above all, to allow scholarly achievement and intellectual quality alone to be the decisive factors. The university not only tolerates, but demands that persons who oppose its aims be admitted to it. So long as these people are content to state and discuss their particular beliefs and authorities within the university, so long as they allow their beliefs to be an impulse for their research, they are useful to the university. But if they seek to dominate the university with these beliefs, if in the selection of candidates for the university they are partial to fellow believers, if they replace intellectual freedom by prophetic propaganda, then they come into the sharpest of conflict with the rest of the university, which aims to uphold the idea of the university. Thank you for listening to this audio recording by David McKerracher, published by Theory Underground. This work has been placed in the public domain because of its importance. I hope that you all enjoy this during your holidays in its small daily doses, like an advent calendar. And that if you are intrigued to hear lectures on the topic of the idea of the university, then I hope you will consider joining the course that I am leading with Brian Weeks and Ann Snellgrove, the three of us, all educators interested in the idea of higher education and a kind of learning environment that cares about the freedom of individuals to be able to research what they find most interesting as opposed to what big business or political partisans think you ought to be researching. I'm going to actually show you all really quick what the website looks like. So you go to theory-underground.com. Make sure to register with the website and then go to courses right here. You can also go to events and get to it that way. And then right here you see Mikey teaches Žižek for They Know Not What They Do. That's a class that kicks off in February. We also have Professional Managerial Class Consciousness. That's kicking off at the end of January. And I'm teaching that one with Elton. And then the Idea of the University right here. All three of these are courses that you can add to your shopping cart and choose to take if you want. But the Idea of the University, if you click on it, if you're not already logged in, then this is what you should see. Click Take This Course, click Add to Cart, View Cart, and then proceed to checkout. Oh, one quick thing, don't forget, I guarantee the verification email will be sent to your spam folder. So if you're going, I tried to sign up with their website, I registered and everything, I never got the email. Don't worry, it's in your spam folder. You just have to find it, and you might not be able to find it from your phone. You might have to actually sit down at a laptop. I'm sorry, it's not always as easy as giant mega corporations make it when you try to do stuff underground. So go for it, try it out. Let me know if it works. Okay, bye. So anyway, that's how you do it. I hope to see you there in the discussions on the Zoom chat, but also in the forums where the real conversation will hopefully be taking place on the website. Anyway, everyone, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Take care.